Cold gold chills his palm like rain on a blade. When Link slips the one ring over his finger, the green hills of home fall away and a shadowed map of Middle-earth blooms in his sight. The change is instantaneous and terrible as thunder. Sound leaches to the edges of the world. Color drains to a few brazen notes. The air grows thick with a hush that presses against the ears like a hand cupped to a mouth. In that hush, the ring speaks in the oldest language of hunger, not with words so much as with promises that taste of victory and of returning. He wakes to the gray valley as if he had been waiting in sleep for its weather. Mud clings about his boots, and the smell of wet earth and crushed grass is sharp under his nose. A wind comes down the slope, cold enough to sting the eyes, and the valley opens in a bowl of stone and low cloud. There is no song here, no kettle smoke curling from a familiar thatch. He knows at once that he is not at home. Some small, steady ache in his chest tells him as plainly as any map. He lifts a hand and finds in the palm a ring of plain, gleaming gold. Small, unassuming, as though it had the dignity of patience. The ring lies half buried in the mud, as though the earth had been loath to keep such a thing. It is worn, its simple band etched with a darkness that moves when he does not look directly at it. He does not know how it came to be there. He only knows that when he touches it, a deeper part of him answers, like a bell set ringing underwater. The metal is colder than it should be. It fits his finger too well, as if it had been waiting for that specific shape of flesh, for that exact warmth. He does not pull back. He has been in strange places before where the world rearranged itself in ways that made hunger and courage partners. He slips the ring on as one might draw a cloak about the shoulders, out of habit, out of need, because some inner thief has learned that advantage is often a thing to be taken when it is given. The moment the gold closes upon his skin, the valley tilts. The light mutates into a map of shadows, and faint lines paths he has never walked show themselves like rivers in a stone. Faces in the distance become smudges. Motion becomes the only truth. Noise dies. The whisper of his own breath blooms, loud and intimate, and then the rest of the world recedes into a kind of polite dream where people move like figures behind glass. Objects retain outline, but not mind. A shepherd, 12 paces off, becomes a soft-edged shape. A woman with a basket, a smear of sepia. Yet some things pierce this veil. Suffering draws a raw, bright thread through the hush, unblurring where it is needed. The ring gives what it likes to give. Sight of weakness, of opportunity. It taught him without lessons to see the single point that would move the loom. He notices the cries only as a vibration under the hush, the sharp, thin sound of panic. 2 breaths, ragged and quick, as if someone were trying to keep the sky from falling in their chest. He turns and sees, half hidden in the reeds by a broken gate, a villager hunched and bleeding. The man's tunic is dark at the shoulder, his face is pale and set. A shaft of wood or iron juts from the mud nearby, a hunting spear perhaps, or the wreckage of a cart. The ring sharpens the edges of that scene until it is all light and need. He feels an immediate clarity. Move, and the man lives. Hesitate, and the man will be food for the valley. Movement is simpler now. The hush folds around his steps, muffling the crush of sod beneath his boots. The world stops noticing him, like a sea turning its back. He closes the space between them in 3 breaths. The reeds whisper against his cloak. Dragonflies, silent as thoughts, scatter. To his ear, the man's pulse is a quick drum in his hands. The air tastes iron. Link reaches down and takes the villager under the arms. The body is lighter than he expects, a ragged bundle of heat and fright. There is no struggle, only a thin moaning that might have been wind. He drags the man to a dip in the lee of a hedgerow, pressing him against the roots where the wet holds warmth. He checks for wound and breath. The man's eyes are half closed, and he keeps blinking as though dazzled by light he cannot name. Link's fingers find a cut. Where a seam of flesh has split and hems of mud cling, he presses palm to cloth, feeling the blood sponge beneath, careful, methodical. He knows enough of first aid to keep panic at bay. Firm pressure, steady breathing, making the injured think there is a plan. The hush of the ring magnifies his small competence into a certainty no sooner felt than enacted. The man sighs, and his hands fumble at the hem of his shirt as if the world was still needing him to pull on strength. There is a near quick sound, boots on frost, someone coming down the lane. Link freezes, the talent in him taught by other fairy moments to weigh a decision in the count of heartbeats. Those approaching are not blurred. The ring allows passage to some and denies it to others. He feels the ring's attention shift like a predator's toward the approaching steps. The voice in the air is not a voice but a promise now, subtle, insistent. It speaks of what the ring will give him if he keeps it. Safety, power to bend the world to his will, the means to make all those he would save owe him their lives. It whispers of paths to lost places and hands to guide him home. He thinks of surrendering it. There are moments in adventures learned and rehearsed when the right act is to lay something down. The ring's nature makes the choice whisper sour. Give it away and the hunger will be sated by another. Keep it and make sure it is a hunger you command. To Link, whose life has been a ledger of choices between the burdens he accepts and those he refuses, this should be simple. Yet the ring is a thing that complicates simplicity. It sets before him vivid images, a town that will not forget him, a people he could shield, a child who would sleep while he stood watch. The images are small moral equations that bend a heart. He hears the stranger's steps draw close, and with them the smell of smoke and the tang of iron. Perhaps a woodcutter, perhaps a scout. The villager at his knee coughs and tries to rise on a ragged elbow. His face is suddenly clear enough to see. He is young, the skin still smooth at the jaw, and there is terror in his eyes. Link steadies him. "Easy," he says, and the word is a rope thrown across chaos. The villager's voice is thin. "They came in the night," he whispers, shouts, "Fire." He breaks off because breath is more important than story. The stranger pauses at the edge of the hedgerow, perhaps seeing nothing, perhaps not caring to peer closer. The hush granted by the ring is not absolute. It bends attention away. It complicates intent, but it cannot conjure absence where another's desire looks. Link can sense, now more clearly than sight, the tilt of desire in that approaching person, curiosity, caution, a grain of greed. He could hand the ring to this man, present it as a lost thing with a good story attached. He could show it as a trinket, shrug off the burden, and walk away into the wet that birthed him. The ring itself flatters him, coaxing him like a master persuading a servant. "Keep me," it seems to say, "and you shall hold the line where the world wants to slip." Instead, Link tucks the man's chin and steadies the cloth at the wound. He fashions a bandage from his own scarf and ties it with a tight, clean knot. His hands are steady, honest in a way that astonishes him. Healing is a kind of making, and he makes now. Warmth, breath, a slow return from the edge. The villager's breathing evens. He opens his eyes and for a small halting moment returns fully to the valley. He looks at Link and gratitude spills out in a ragged human sound. There is a temptation to reveal where the ring came from, to offer it as proof of a tale, to confess that the gold belonged to no one and to all. But Link feels the ring press its small feral weight against the soft underside of his finger, and the press becomes possession. He is not ignorant of the cost. He knows, in the place that has always kept the small and dutiful truths, that taking for advantage is a root from which many tyrannies grow. Yet he also knows that the world offers few clear paths between cowardice and brutality. A tool is neutral until used, and here the tool gives him what he needs to save what he has just saved. The choice narrows like the mouth of a spear. As the stranger's boots slow at the hedge, Link rises. He cradles the vanquished man's head and speaks low, the hush of the ring making his voice a private thing. "Go," he says to the villager, "find a healer at the ford. Tell them who helped you." The man nods, clumsy with thanks, and when he staggers away, it is with the uncertain gait of someone who has been given back life by another's hand. The approaching figure pauses at the place where the vanishing man was. For a heartbeat, it looks around as if searching for ghosts, and then it turns toward the lane again. Link remains, the ring warm against his finger, its hunger like a small animal in his hand. He has done what he set out to do, a life preserved, a danger averted. Yet the ring does not release him with thanks. Its whispers grow more intimate, less the echo of promises than the shaping of thought. Find who killed, mend who is broken, chase down where the smoke comes from. It shows him visions, not digits or banners, but smells of iron and wood, a crouched figure in a doorway, a child's slipper by a cold hearth. Each image is a pin pressed into a map, and with each, the ring tightens its claim. He could bury it. He could take the ring to the hedge and leave it to the earth as he found it, to be an accident no more remarkable than a lost trinket. He could ask the nearest steward, the nearest wise man, to take it from him and hide it where he could not find it again. Yet each route is a removal of power, and Link, who has walked for the sake of helping others, feels an unfamiliar calculus tugging his spine. The ring has offered him advantage. He has used that advantage to save a life. The decision to keep it arrives like a quiet folding, not triumphant, not shameful, merely necessary in his accounting. So, he keeps it. He presses his hand to his chest for a brief moment, feeling the small hollow under the jacket, where the thought of home sits like a coin. He turns and looks toward the distant smoke that marks the next point on the valley's ragged horizon. The ring hums, a subtle orchestra beneath skin, and the path it draws is sharp as a knife edge. He has chosen possession over surrender, not with the drumbeat of a coronation, but with the mute, private oath of a man who will need to answer later for what he has done. The hunger is there now, patient and bright, an ache at the margin of his bones. He rises, ring warm and heavy as a secret, and steps toward the lane where the smoke lingers. His purpose is not yet clear even to him. He will seek the source of the fire. He will learn who struck the spear and why. He will walk where the map the ring gives him points. But beneath these outward motions, something else turns. An inner tally being kept by a voice small and ancient, waiting for the day it demands recompense. The valley closes its chill about him, and he moves into it, the ring a new rhythm in his step. The gray light of the late afternoon pooled in puddles and on the backs of the rocks, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a figure stepped out of that held breath as if born from it, tall, bent, and bright-haired, with a staff that drank the dim and gave it back as silver. Gandalf came with the small feet of wind and the old slow steps of one who has walked beneath many moons. He did not hurry. He did not glare. He simply stood and looked at the gold clasped in Link's hand as a man looks at a wound, that which you hold is no trifle, Gandalf said. His voice was a lantern swung slowly in a long corridor. It showed edges and shadows alike. It is a ring forged for a single will. It bears names and weight that no sword can balance. Link felt the gold grow heavy between his fingers, as if the world itself leaned toward it. The ring hummed, a barely audible thing at first, like beams settling in a house. Then its sound sharpened, and with the sharpened sound came a taste, metal and salt, and the memory of another field, another sky. Link pulled his hand back, as one does from a hot iron, but not before the ring gave him a voice that was not his own. It breathed a name that was old even to Gandalf's ears. The syllable hung for a blink, a skin of light on the air. Gandalf's face did not show surprise. He had seen many small kings and many greater follies. You wear the ring of one, he said. It will answer you as a master answers a servant. It will offer what you most desire, and it will take what you would least expect. Then give it to me, Link said simply. His hand tightened around the gold. I can use it. I can... Gandalf's laugh was not mirthful. It was a sound like dry leaves where rain will fall. Mastery of that thing is a crueler art than any blade you know. Each call it answers leaves a cipher in the heart, strength in the hand, fading in the memory. Do you know the price? Link did not. He only knew the faces he had seen in skirmish and song, the small, stubborn flame of duty that would not be smothered. He had arrived with a pact to protect. He could feel that pact burning now, and the ring's gold pulse seemed to answer it. Gandalf lifted his staff, and the air around them grew colder. Frosts that had no business in that season feathered across the grass. Ring madness walks like a shadow, he said. It gives sight, then takes kin. You will vanish from others' eyes when you wear it. You will see into doorways that men were not meant to open. You will hear voices long silenced, and with each memory stolen, you will gain a leash on a forgotten power. The ring feeds on what is merciful until mercy is gone, and it hoards memory until the heart is a storehouse of what was once loved and now cannot be touched. Mercy is the currency of friendship. The ring trades it for remembrance. Link swallowed. He had been invisible before, in caves and when sneaking past guards. Invisibility, he knew, could be mercy. A stolen step could save a life. But the way Gandalf spoke made invisibility sound like a doorway with a thief in it. Gain for him, loss for others. The ring's song hovered under Gandalf's words, a soft and poisonous lullaby. It spoke of enemies felled without blow, of justice meted with no pain to the innocent. It painted a world remade by a single, unerring hand. "Show me," Link said at last. The word was not brave. It was simple and hungry. Let me see what it gives. Gandalf's gray eyes went to the ring. For a moment, they were as old as elder trees and as weary. Once you wear it, there is no undoing its hearing, he warned. It will find you when you hide and call to itself when you forget. And the nine will answer. The name fell like a stone. Even spoken softly, it made the air condense. Link's fingers tightened, so that his knuckles pale. Gandalf did not elaborate. There was no need. The Nazgul, those oncemen who had been given rings and then undone, were a long shadow, a bell whose toll trembled across the land. Their hunger for the ring was not hunger as men know it. It was a summons deeper than longing, older than hunting. To them, the ring was a lost song, and song draws song in return. Link slid the gold on his finger. At first, nothing more than a shiver ran down his arm. The light did not change. His hands were still, the grass still whispering. Then the world rolled like a tide. Sound pulled away from him as if threaded through water. Colors softened at the edges. He felt the presence of others as if through thick glass. Intact, muffled, near and yet impossibly distant. He tested it. He breathed out the mist, and his exhale clouded the air and hung there, then vanished as if it did not belong. He took a step. The scraping of his boots was a dry, far-off thing. Voices that had been close as the beating of wings drifted and loosened. "It is an effect like a cloak," Gandalf said. He watched Link with the careful sadness one reserves for a child who has just been shown a fire. It makes you unseen by most eyesight, but the seeing that remains is not the same. Link's own voice came strange to him, richer, as if someone had tuned it on a new instrument. He felt a thrill, the old thrill of being able to move unseen through ranks of foes. This was power. It tasted like tasting victory before the first blow. Then the whispers started. At first, they were a trickle, a name in the wind, a child's laughter curling like smoke, a bell that had once rung in some far place. They touched him like fingers on the skin of memory. He knew them and did not. Faces assembled at the edges of his thought, soft and indistinct. A woman smiling by starlight. Was it from his past, or a past the ring offered as bribe? The warmth of a hand, the creak of a doorway he had not opened, each memory pressed as if to be catalogued. Gandalf's staff thudded once on the earth. "Every time the ring hides you, it keeps a ledger," he said, "not of deeds, but of remembrances. The thing is jealous of living kindness. It trades mercy for memory, and that theft is subtle. You do not notice until the absence is a cleft that will not heal." Link reached for a memory and felt it slide like quicksilver from his grasp. The child's laughter that had braided itself into his name snapped away and left only the echo of a note. He tried to summon the image of a sky from his youth. It came back dimmer, like a painting seen through smoked glass. Panic rose. He tugged at the ring, and it bit warmth into his skin as if it were feeding on the very thought. "Stop," Gandalf said gently. He did not try to wrench the ring free. The truth of the thing was not in force, but in surety. If you keep wearing it, you will find that the faces you love fade. The more you use the ring to spare others, the more you spare the memory of why you spared them. One day, you will stand among friends and not understand their grief until you have caused it afresh. Link's jaw set. The ring's whisper, cushioned and dangerously flattering, cooed against his ear. It spoke of a war ended with a single step, of shadows unmade and children saved. Each promise lined itself with small barbs. For every saved life, another thought fell away. His mind pictured the faces of those he sought to protect, and for a frightening half-second could not find the color of one companion's hair. The ring's ledger started its tally. "I will not let them take it," Link said, voice tight. "If I can hold it, if I can learn it, I can bring them down. I can end a hunt." Gandalf's face folded, the way old parchment folds when you smooth it with the back of your hand. "It is not a tool to be learned like sword or bow," he said. "It is a will that will learn you. That is its art, and that is its danger." Around them, the light slid harder toward evening. The air tasted of rain and iron. Far away, the land itself seemed to listen. A hush fell on birds and beasts, as if they too feared the sounding of a bell. Gandalf lowered his voice until it was nearly a breath. "There are other dangers," he added. "The ring sings a summons that the Nazgul cannot resist. They will leave whatever darkness keeps them when they sense it called." Link felt the words as a wind that tugged the ring on his finger. He had thought of Nazgul as stories of dread, long separated from his own path. The notion that their hunger could be set upon him now struck like a sword in the ribs. He pictured them, black riders on black steeds, cloaks like oil, the will of Sauron in their bones, and his throat closed. "Then let them come," he said. The phrase came from somewhere stubborn and green, like a new blade pushing through frost. "If they hunt, I will meet them. Better I than others." Gandalf's look was not anger, but grief. He saw a long list of possible endings scroll behind Link's stance. Bravery bent to folly, courage fed into a machine. He could only press his hand a little on Link's shoulder. An old man's benediction and warning wrapped together. "You must choose quickly what kind of life you will live," he said. "A life that holds memory, or one that holds power at the price of forgetting. The road is narrow." Before Link could answer, a sound pricked the air, a whisper of iron on leather that made the hair rise along his arms. From the direction of the moor, the sky darkened at the edge as if a cloud slid down to crawl over the land. The ring against his finger thrummed like a bell struck within a deep hall. It was a small sound, barely there, and it carried the weight of a calling. Gandalf's staff drew a line of light on the grass. "They have heard," he said. Simply, "The 9 are upon the wind." Link's heart answered in the same measure. The choice he'd just made solidified into a shape, refusal, and the consequences fell behind him like a shadow pouring into his wake. He slid the ring fully on, feeling the metal cool and then pulse warmly. The world closed colors, shifted to a palette of lead and bone. He could see the tremor of distant grass where the Nazgul's mounts would pass. He could sense, faint and terrible, a hunger that was not for flesh, but for belonging. Gandalf moved to the path. He did not draw a sword. His hand on Link's shoulder was a weathered map. "Then run," he said. "Run with what knowledge you have. Keep your heart, Link. Remember why you began." Link did not look back. He did not know if he could still recall the voices Gandalf had named as friends, or whether those names had already thinned to ghost words. What he did know was the burn of the gold on his finger, the cold of the air, the weight of a promise made to a land he had chosen to protect. He had refused to hand the ring to Gandalf, and that refusal had set into motion something older than both their wills. As they broke into a run, the first cry came from the moor, a high, keening sound that was not meant for ears like theirs. The land answered with a smaller, sharper noise, the beat of hooves, then a darker thud, and then the draft of a presence that unmade the air itself. Shadows at the horizon gathered and took to motion like oil being blown into shapes that were no longer bound by form. Link's breath hitched, and with each step, the whispers behind the ring grew louder. He felt beneath the ring song the slow suture of something sewing him to a fate he had chosen. He ran because he must, because running was a thing he could do, because the sky had already decided that this would be a hunt. Ahead, The moor spilled black into the road, and in that black a tall figure uncoiled and set itself astride a horse that smoked like a nightmare. The Nazgul's voice rose, not a shout, but a hollow call that carried like a bell struck in deep water. It was not yet close enough to cut flesh, but it cut the world into before and after. Link clenched his hand at his side. The ring sang more insistently now, promising a path through the shadow if he would let it lead. His mind flickered with the faces that thinned like light through glass. He steadied himself on the knowing that a choice still lay open, to let memory be eaten and power keep him upright, or to relinquish the gold and let the hunt pass into others' hands. He chose, for the moment, the thing that would carry him forward. He felt the ring's warmth like a promise, and felt, too, Gandalf's, steady in hand, leave him to his steps. The hunt had begun, and the road ahead was a blade with two edges. The little gold circled his finger and whispered. Link ran toward the dark, and the shadow answered with wings that spread slow and inevitable across the sky. Darkness paid heed as if to a summons. Far to the east, the lidless eye stirred, a movement like a blade sliding in its sheath, and the air about empires grew thin and metallic. Wherever that watching will fixed itself, fires answered in folded hills, and war crowds turned their heads. Aragorn felt the change as a tightening at the back of his throat, a cold at his fingers, and he read the omen as one reads a wound. Something alive had noticed the ring's new choice. He called for men with no flourish, only a voice worn to authority by long nights. They came from the marchlands and the hollow places, from the roads that forget and the farms that remember, and they came with lanterns and with questions on their tongues. "Is it right?" one blunt-faced captain asked under his breath, the typicism of fear making him small, that a Hylian should carry such fire? The word Hylian fell odd in that field, a foreign bell among familiar stones. It named a stranger of another world with a hatchet face and a quiet courage. Aragorn's eyes were cliffs. He answered without cheer. "Right is a thing we make in the doing," he said, "and right is often costly. He walks with it now. We must walk with him, or stand aside and watch the road turn to ruin." The men shifted constellations of doubt moved across their features. Some gripped spears harder. Others imagined home smoke swallowed by a shadow that smelled of iron and hunger. Link felt the burden differently. The ring lay in his palm like a sleeping thing that remembered stars. It hummed not with sound, but with suggestion. Each small glimmer drew a picture behind his eyes. The first image came as a river mended, broken banks knit into a single bank, waters remembering how to run untroubled. He used the ring then because the captain of a small village had bled, an ugly tear in flesh, boned skin to light, and the soldiers had no healer. Link placed the gold upon the wound and meant only relief. The light drank the crimson and stitched the flesh as deftly as a mother's hand, and the man rose from the mud with a new step. But when the man looked up, his face had gone wrong, not marred, but empty, as if a story had been excised. The scar of grief smoothed into calmness, and in that calmness the man's name vanished from his mouth. He grasped the hilt of his sword and asked, in a voice that could not find its past, where his promise had been. Link saw with the clumsy cruelty of one who has mended fragile things that the ring had balanced the ledger, not giving without taking. It had healed the flesh and carried away the outline of memory. The soldier could fight. He could remember how to stand and swing. He could not remember why he had chosen to stand Each small mercy sealed a bargain in silence. The ring's whispers were honey and rumor, and they painted futures with broad, seductive strokes. Hyrule, shimmering green and hill-born, unfurled in Link's mind like a map rolled at the cuff of fate. The ring showed him fields unscarred by calamity, the castle's roofs whole, children running through orchards that had never known shadow. It did not show the cost. It merely showed the bloom. Use me as tool, not as master, the gold seemed to promise, and for a while Link believed himself the craftsman and not the clay. Aragorn watched these transformations with a guarded grief. He had seen power bind men before he had seen oaths undo themselves beneath brighter temptations. When Link returned from one such healing, a troop of Gondor veterans at his flank, their eyes cleared of fear, but their tongues slack with lost oaths, Aragorn approached with the wary courtesy of an old captain meeting a new captain. Power will wear a face familiar to men's need, Aragorn said quietly, so only Link could hear. It will wear mercy, the artful cloak, but every garment hides seams. Link's hand tightened upon the ring as if to squeeze an answer out of it. His voice came like wind through a ruined hall. I used it to stop a man from dying, he told Aragorn, and there was the small and terrible pride of a man who had found a way to help. It was mercy, and mercy that takes what makes a man himself is not mercy at all, a voice replied. Eomer's, perhaps, or some other who had not yet traded memory for obedience. We ride to preserve the world's shape, not to replace it with a shape we fancy better. The men around them murmured. Some saw in Link's axe a salvation. Some saw instead a reaping. Aragorn's shadow fell long on the road. He did not order the ring taken from Link's hand. He did not yet forbid it. He could only make a line with his words, a reason to pause. We are bound by oaths, he said, and by the scars those oaths clothe. If you wield this gold, see what it asks in return. The ring asked more. With a touch to a locked gate, it opened stone as if unfastened by time. With a thought toward a wary captain, it bent the loyalty of men like reeds to wind. Link tried it once in a different mood, pressed to command where once he would have asked. He merely wished that the scattered folk of a beleaguered village should stand steadfast, and the ring spilled warmth into their minds. They straightened, fear folded into order. They obeyed without questioning, without the clumsy human mess of consent. The power of command arrived soft and immediate, and in its wake went the promises those men had made to hearth and kin. One mother who had pledged her son to a crust in a field found that pledge gone. He had not lied. He remembered only the call to stand, and a stranger's vow had taken the room that once held his home. Link noticed each stealing with the strange private cold of someone who had hung a price and not known its currency. He told himself that restraint still lived within him. He only used the ring where need burned like a visible wound, he vowed. He only stepped on the path the ring lit for him where crowds would have fallen otherwise. Yet the ring's patient mind worked like roots beneath soil. It fed itself upon small acceptances until they became the ground upon which Link walked. Each use scarred him not with visible marks, but with a softening at the heart that let other voices in more easily. It taught him to solve ends through its copperlit means, and to forget asking how many names those ends required. Sauron's insight sharpened as these bargains multiplied. The dark thought took hold like a blacksmith's grip, feeling the change of the world through the tremor of its own desire. His servants moved, shadows at first, and then men with horses and banners, for any change in the balance of will was salt in his halls, and he read the shifting as a map. The Nazgul rode sooner than their masters expected, their coming like a long rising cord. They smelled not only the ring, but the new strain of intent that had visited it, a foreignness to its usual hunger, someone who would use it for repair rather than dominion. That novelty intrigued and angered Sauron both. He did not understand it easily. The road to Mordor itself seemed to open under Link's boots, not as a forced clearing made by armies, but as a yielding of the ground prompted by thought. Bridges mended, the host of small guards along the way turned aside, and a compass of enemies fractured as men found new loyalties in the pocket of gold. Aragorn watched this like a physician notes a spreading fever. He could not heal it by mere words. He assembled scouts and messengers, not to seize the ring but to keep watch, for he feared that if Link walked into Mordor with the gold upon his hand, the thing would not only claim names and faces, but would speak to the very bone of the world. "You must choose," Aragorn said at dusk, with the city lamps starting like distant stars. "To carry or to cast away. Neither choice will leave you unmarked." His voice was kind, but it carried the weight of mountains turned on their keels. Link looked up at him. The twilight drew a halo around the ring and made it look less like metal and more like promise. "Hyrule could be saved," Link whispered. He spoke of fields and people he had left behind in another life, of a prince's laughter and of songs nobody in these lands knew. His longing filled him like a draft. "If I keep it, I can mend what was broken. I can make whole what was torn." Aragorn's hand brushed the pommel of his sword. "And if you keep it, you may remake what was not yours to remake," he answered. "If you make Hyrule whole in one world, you may ruin the shape of this one. The ring answers only to more ring, and to the will that feeds it." Link's fingers closed on the gold until the knuckles shone white. Around them, men murmured and shifted, caught between awe and terror. The ring showed pictures of bridges that would carry them home, of foes that could be healed into friends with only a whisper. It slid scenes of peace into Link's head like a dream that refuses the day. That night, Link slept badly, and the ring did not sleep at all. It fed him images while the campfire breathed and the watch sang low and weary songs. Oh, his hands, it started not only to promise but to instruct. A voice that was neither male nor female filled the shape of his mind with maps, with whispers of pathways no foot had trod, with an invitation to march straight through the bones of enemy lines and into the very center of Mordor. It showed him a path unsullied by siege, a road that bent the hearts of men before they could lift spears. To take it would be to accept a shortcut of a kind that devours longer, truer roads. When dawn broke, Link rose and set the gold upon a map. The ring seemed to warm there, as if the world itself were a bell it wished to ring. Aragorn watched the road. The metal drew. There was a place where the land dipped and then climbed, where the air grew thin and black smoke forever hummed. It was the place the world dreaded. It was the place no man meant to set foot upon willingly. Link placed his boot upon the road and felt the earth answer. The choice was no longer one of possible right and wrong. It was a step. "I will go," he said, and the voice in him had lost the soft tremor of doubt. Aragorn tried to find counsel in that voice and found only a finality like a tool settling in the hand. "If you go," Aragorn said slowly, "I ride after you, not to take the ring, but to keep what you will not keep sight of." There was a promise in that vow that could save or doom them both. Link looked once at the faces around him, soldiers with hollowed names, a captain who had returned from healing with no memory of home, a queenless land tremulous on the lip of war, and then at Aragorn. The ring pulsed, and his hand moved as if moved by another. He crossed the line. He set one foot upon the road and felt the pull, not just of destination, but of an acquiescence that tasted like iron. The world seemed to lean a little toward him, listening. Behind him, men packed and hoisted, for what else could one do when following a chosen road? Ahead, the ground thickened with shadow. In his palm, the ring lay bright, and its voice promised mending in great, irretrievable sweeps. Link's breath drew cold. He had not yet broken. He had not yet been remade. But with the road opening under his boots and Aragorn's promise at his back, he crossed the fine line from hope into culpability, and the march toward Mordor began with careful, fatal steps. Ash lay upon the land like gray snow, yet it burned the feet as if with frost of iron. The plain that led to the mountain rolled away in waves of black sand and crumbling stone, and the air was thick with the taste of old coal and something older still, a tannin of rot that clung to tongue and cloak. Link walked there with the ring upon his hand. It fitted, as if made for him. It sat cool at first, then warmer, like the coiling of a living thing beneath the skin. Each step toward Orodruin seemed to pull at him, as if the road itself were a cord bound to that gold. Gollum moved beside him in a silence that was not silence, a rustle of rag and breath. He muttered, and his voice split into two small, wetted tones, one pleading, the other slick with calculation. He told of old ways and older cruelties in a crooked song, and Link listened because pity had been his sword before it was his curse. The pity remained, but it grew braided to a new hunger, to keep, to guard, to possess the only thing that could end certain pains. Every time Link put the ring upon his finger, something small of him unthreaded. At first it was an unimportant thing, a taste, a song. Then the loss lengthened into memory. Names blurred at the edges, the laugh of a friend returned hollower. The first time the ring did him a visible favor, it was subtle as old magic. Night fell faster than the sun's habit, but the shadow that cloaked them deepened like a curtain drawn by a hand. Link felt the world thin to the sound of his own breath and the soft rasp of Gollum's voice. When danger shook the plain, a patrol of black-armed men with caps of iron, the ring hollowed the light. Stones and gullies accepted them like a robe. Link moved as if underwater. Sound dimmed, motion slowed, and they passed among enemies who only brushed air. He thought then that the ring saved them. He thought it was mercy. The ring's mercy came with a bill. Each time he summoned its hiding, something in him stayed behind among the rocks they had skirted. A small trustfulness, the kind you give two-handed to strangers, did not return. He found his hand steady, but his touch less lenient. Once he would have bent to pick up a fallen bird and set it on its wings. Now his fingers closed and held the creature, looking to see what it was worth. The loss was not sudden and monstrous. It was cumulative, like frost that begins at the edge of a leaf and slowly eats inward. Link could measure it by what he forgot the name of a hill, a tune hummed at an inn, a soft face from the mornings before war. They drifted like ashes in his mind, and the ring kept them as if they were trinkets. Gollum watched this with a worship that sometimes sharpened into scorn. "Precious gives, yes, precious gives," he croaked, But then he would hover near the wound the ring made and whisper, "What remains? What remains?" He loved and feared it as if it were a mother that ate its young. In the hollow of his mutterings, Link heard bargains. The ring spoke too, not with words that the throat could shape, but with pictures that rose like mirages, fair fields that had never been, and cities mended of stone and song. It showed him a multitude relieved, the small cruelties of the world made right by an iron hand that bore a golden ring. Power was presented as kindness with teeth. Link's hands flexed toward such a kindness as old wounds ache toward sleep. When the first wraith came, it rode the wind with no sound at first, like the fall of a shadow. There was a pressure in the chest then, a fine, urgent ache, as if the soul were being prodded with a cold wire. Link's skin prickled with 1,000 small needles. The creature sought the ring by weight of longing, and its presence was a blade that showed the thin places in a man. Link felt himself growing smaller, not by size, but by property. His private warmth drew bow faces he loved, crowded the edges of his sight like moths. He could have flung the ring into the greater dark and run, but those elbowing pictures, cities, healed hands, friends kept from grief, held him fast. Compulsion and compassion braided together until he could not tell which strand he was following. Thereafter, the land itself began to answer the ring's claim. Heat rose from the plain in waves that shimmered like breath, and the rock around the mountain exuded a fine, poisonous dust that stuck to skin and memory. The farther they walked, the more the ring hungered for the mountain's voice, and Link felt it pull at him like a lover tugging a cloak. With its influence, the world grew clearer in certain terrible ways. He could see for a moment the outline of enemies beyond ridge lines, the pattern of patrols, the supply roads like veins under skin. He could bend shadow to hide them or draw light to them, and when he did, the ring's laughter was a quick, bright thing under his ribs. Each such use took from him a small human weight, a curiosity, a jest, the slow, crooked speech of his childhood. He would make a trick of the world, and the trick would be perfect, cold, efficient, and without remorse. There were moments when he resisted. A scout once limped into their path, a young thing with a broken arm and the stench of smoke. Link's first movement was to help his hands, still moved on muscle memory, toward sling and bandage. The ring hissed under his skin like a thing amused. Gollum's eyes glittered. "Keep it," he breathed. "Keep it for good, for kindnesses." Link could imagine healing that arm for all the wounded in the world. He could imagine an end to certain terrors if only he would wear the ring openly in command. Yet every word in that imagining had the texture of ash. He bound the scout's arm and let him go, but when the man's face passed from his view, a sliver of pity sloughed off him like skin. Sometimes the ring borrowed his dreams. In those nights between ash and dawn, Link awoke smelling salt he had not known in years, a sea from another life, and saw, as if through glass, a spring of clear water and a green hill with a windmill upon it. He reached, and the memory receded. In its place rose a throne and a path of ruined banners. The ring could gild a memory into a crown and then give the crown back only for a price. Gollum watched such nights with something almost reverent. When Link woke, he sometimes could not recall the real face of a friend. The loss tightened like a ring around his ribs. The nearer they drew to the mountain skirts, the more permanent the marks grew. The gold of the ring branded his skin where it rested. At first it was a faint sheen, barely more than a burn. but it would not be washed away. At night, the mark faintly glowed a dull, impossible light under his sleeve, and once he saw, reflected in a pool of black water, a line of gold at his wrist that looked like a broken sunrise. It was not merely a scar, it was a promise that the ring had set its teeth. Gollum would sometimes reach and trace that line with a finger, whispering to it like a child to a sleeping thing. They passed places where the ground was rent and fire breathed from deep seams. The air itself tasted of iron and old regrets. From time to time, the sky above the mountain cracked with light, and in that light, Link saw shapes that were not of this world. Banners with eyes woven into the cloth, shapes of men with faces of ash. The ring drew them like a beacon. It also lent him sight. In certain cold and useful ways he could feel the pattern of that longing, map where it gathered, and step between those seams. Each victory was paid for by a slippage inside him, an unwound thread in the knot of his heart. He fought with a grace that was not his alone anymore. When he swung his blade, it sang a new high note not heard in the songs of his home. He killed without the aftertaste of sorrow that had once made his hands tremble. The cost was a small hollow left in the chamber where memory should keep company with mercy. Gollum grew bolder, a creature that fed on small betrayals. He would tell tales to the ring as if it were both judge and kin, and sometimes he would whisper, "It loves you. It loves you more than we do." This praise chewed like a nail under the tongue. Link did not know what to answer, for his words were being replaced by deeds, and those deeds required fewer explanations. He found himself counting down distances rather than names. He learned to map the cracks of the mountain like a captain memorizes currents. He found that mastery over a thing grows easier the less one resists it. The ring's claws slid in more surely when the hand that bore it had fewer attachments left with which to push back. At last, the path turned, and the great crater of the mountain yawned ahead with the hunger of an old beast. The rock around the mouth was black and slick, and the air sang with a high metallic note that set the teeth on edge. Heat rolled off the stones in palpable waves, and in the light of the furnace within the mountain, the gold of the ring flared as if answering a trumpet. Link stood on the lip of that terrible bowl and felt the last of the plains fall away from beneath his feet. Below, the Samoth Naur gaped like a mouth waiting to swallow. Above, the sky was a thin brass. Gollum's breath came out in quick, ratty noises. He crouched as if preparing to leap, to steal, to sob. The choice at the fire approached as a living thing, its teeth bared. Link felt the split in himself widen. One part longing to lay the ring into the flame where it had been forged, to finish what had been begun. Another part thinking of the good it might enact if he kept it, the wrongs it might right with a stern and unbending hand. He thought of the faces he had already lost like leaves, and he feared what else the ring might take. He could not tell which fear was his and which the ring's. His hand lay upon the band with a pressure of its own, and the gold trembled as if impatient. Behind him, the plain hummed with the coming of enemies made of shadow and order, and in front, the mountain's throat breathed out a heat that promised oblivion. Link stepped forward, one part of his soul already leaning into the flame. He could feel the world choosing with him. Even the stone underfoot seemed to tilt. Gollum crouched, eyes enormous and bright as small moons, with a hunger that was worshipful and deadly all at once. The ring pulsed on his finger like a heart. He drew a slow, deliberate breath, and with that breath, Something smaller than courage and larger than fear uncoiled inside him. He did not yet know which road he would take, only that the next step would carve a line he could not completely erase. He stands at the lip of the world as if the whole earth had been reduced to that thin rim of stone, and fire breathes beneath him like a living thing. Heat presses at his breast, the air tastes of iron and old smoke. Ash falls slow as gray rain, and every step toward the fissure sounds small and terrible in the wide, hollow throat of the mountain. Behind him, there are muffled voices. There is the scrape of armor, a sob caught and broken, a prayer spoken as if to loosen the world. Ahead is nothing but the ring's bright hunger, turning and brightening like a star made wicked. The ring sits in his palm, so much smaller than the might it held. Its gold is clean and cold at the same time, a coin turned from the sun. It hums with intimate promises, and the sound is not noise so much as a pressure against thought. It tells him he could be king. The syllable is simple, almost affectionate. It breathes up visions of crowns and citadels, of wars ended by his hand, and songs raised to his name. He feels the pull of those songs, the ease of being desired instead of needing to seek. The way power would close the ache that has been at his ribs for as long as he remembers. Faces flutter at the edge of his mind like moths. They are bright and indistinct. A girl who used to braid her hair, a man with steady, silent hands, a cottage door that smelled of wood smoke and wind. Each visage is a warmth he has carried across deserts and foreign fields, a compass that has kept him from falling. The ring notes them and tightens its voice. It shows him how colors would come to him if he accepted. It promises return, and yet the return is not to what was but to a throne that would take those faces and make them courtiers in a hall of stone. He hears the mountains speak in other tongues now, the old language of root and stone, and it strains his will like a rope under weight. He remembers the faces that trusted him to carry their hopes. He remembers the ache of leaving them behind. He remembers, too, the trail of things done by power without humility. Ruined gardens with names like Light, cities whose bright towers were built upon the bones of the low. The rings offer glitters with convenience. It would spare him the long road of learning what must and what must not be done. It would let him mend the world in one sovereign sweep. His fingers close once, twice around the ring, and he feels it working in him, shaping the memory into a ladder he might climb. The whisper becomes clearer. It calls him by some chosen greatness, and beneath that call there is a sound like 1,000 small doors opening, each a door to a life not his. In the creases of his hands there are maps. In the hollows of his chest there are names that begin to slide away the moment the ring shows him what he could have instead. A shadow moves at his elbow. Small and lithe, it is more bone and hunger than flesh. Teeth click in a sound neither oath nor music. The stranger, if stranger is the word for that twisted, pleading creature, lunges. Old fealty and old hatred tangle there. Fingers, ragged and desperate, scrabble for gold. The world narrows to the flash of that hand, the wet sound of desperate hunger, and the ring's hard light. For a breath, thought fractures. The strand between him and the ring pulls taut. A current runs through it like a note held from some instrument that has never been played before. A memory, raw and bright, blooms. A field of green where the wind moved the waist-high grass like waves. A child's laugh in that field, a little cottage at dusk. He senses the shape, home, not as a place with a name, but as a warm geometry of recurrent gestures. For that instant, the ring whispers that it can deliver all of that if he will only let it be his. Something in him recoils. The rope of temptation snaps. He feels, as if from far away, the faces that will not be sold. He thinks of the quiet courage of those who sent him on this path. He thinks of hands clasped in trust and of a map scribbled on napkin edges of people who would stand raw and defiant because he chose to stand. He has learned another kind of hunger on the road, a hunger for rightness rather than rule. The ring has no answer for that hunger. It can only devour it. He steps forward. The stone underfoot flings faint sparks. The air screams with heat and memory, and the ring pulls at him like weather. Voices gather in his ear, some pleading, some accusing. He feels the mountain's old animus, the world itself bracing. The stranger bites. For a second, the world stutters. He sees the creature's eyes, bright as wet pebbles, and there is a tiny animal terror in them. It lunges again, and this time his hand moves with a motion honed by 100 small decisions and many days of lonely training. He casts the ring. The gesture is not graceful. It is quick, brutal, resolute. Gold catches the light, and for an instant, every desire in the world seems to cry out in that little circle. The ring resists as if it were a living thing, refusing fire. It throbs against his palm, and the air around him darkens with voice. The sound is 1,000 hands on doors, a chorus of lost kings and women who would have worn no crowns. It tells him his name like a plea. He hears, over the roar, a sudden wet cry. The stranger's voice, small and surprised, and then the little hand scrabbles for purchase on the rim of stone. Fingers close. For a breath, an ancient tale threatens to repeat itself. Clawing, a slip, a fall. But this time, the decision is his alone and not a treachery of fate. He feels the ring slip from his grasp and arc. For a heartbeat, the world hangs. Gold meets fire. It does not simply melt. The ring resists with the last of its cunning. For an instant, the metal seems to glow with faces, with memory searching for purchase. It claws at his mind, and he feels his past unspool under its touch like a skein of bright thread drawn through a hand. Names, songs, the smell of that cottage hearth, one by one they fray and loosen. He feels them fall into the dark behind him. The ring offers him as it dies a price. Keep a crown and lose those small mercies, or let go and be left unmade. He makes no bargain. The metal blacks, it cracks with a sound like bone, and then it shrieks, a thin, clean sound that is not of this world. Fire takes it, and the shriek is swallowed. The mountain throws up a smoke that tastes of old things, and for a long, ringing second, the very air seems to hold its breath. Then the pressure breaks. Somewhere far below, a great loosening moves through the earth like a held note released. A tremor runs out in waves, and with it, a sound as if 1,000 shackles had fallen to the ground. Silence follows. It is deep and stunned and enormous. Ash settles again. The stranger hangs on the rim and then slips, and for a moment the world watches the small falling thing and then continues. He lands with a dull impact and does not rise. No gore blooms. The watchers do not savor violence. There is only a small animal finality and a hush, like the closing of a book. Around him, the others breathe as if for the first time. Relief is a raw blade, and it cuts. Voices gather and break. Some are joyful, some are tears. Hands come to his shoulders, to his face, to the cloak where the heat has left a faint scent. They call his name the way people call to a friend who has come back from drowning. with disbelief and with a clumsy joy. He recognizes the timbre of those voices as belonging to allies. He knows they have saved a world. He knows in the clean, simple way of flesh that something terrible and necessary is done. But the threads that wove his nights and days before are gone. Names slip like water through cupped palms. He feels the absence as a hollow space inside him, a chamber in which a hearth once burned. He can no longer summon the smell of wood smoke that used to mean home. The girl's braid is a shape he cannot fill with memory. The map drawn on a napkin, the sound of a doorway closing, these are missed now, and his hands close on emptiness. He does not panic. That would have been easier. Instead, there is a quiet, a small, brave steadiness. He feels beneath the loss an odd clarity, as if all that was entangled by the ring's promise has been cut away. The world, free of that malign singing, breathes simpler breaths. The shadows lift. The burden of rule is nowhere upon him. He has given up the chance for crowns and ease. He has become, paradoxically, lighter. A companion kneels before him and places a hand there, where the ring had been carried. The hand is warm, and the touch speaks without words. He meets the companion's eyes and finds in their steadiness a new anchor. The companion murmurs his name, less as a summons and more as a reintroduction. The syllables are foreign now. He tries them. They are like clothes that do not fit. Yet the weight of them is a rope thrown into his life, and he takes hold. He does not ask to be told all that he was. Stories will be told around fires. They will stitch together fragments into a likeness he might inhabit. For now he stands and does what must be done. He moves from the edge of the fissure with slow, deliberate steps. The mountain seems to exhale, the ash thins, the sky beyond the mountain, unseen yet suddenly freer, inclines toward morning. As he walks, the emptiness that has hollowed him is not empty of purpose. It is space carved for something new. The faces that once filled that space may never return as they were. Names will have to be learned again, a language of small kindnesses, relearned as if each were a new map. There will be grief for the lost geometry of home, and there will be quiet, persistent gratitude for the world that continues. He looks neither backward nor forward with certainty. Instead, he moves with the simplest intent: to keep walking while the world wakes. Companions fall into step around him, soft as shadows. They do not press with questions. They do not give him answers in place of what is gone. They offer only presence, the slow insistence of those who have seen him act and know what that act cost. On his lips there is no song yet, no great proclamation. There is only a small, steady readiness. He will learn the shape of his mornings anew. He will learn the smell of bread and the sound of a door closing by the repetition of acts and the patient telling of tales around embers. The mountain behind him will hold its silence. The world he saved will move forward, bearing the wound and the cure together. He pauses once at the edge of the clearing of blackened stone and looks at the sky. The smoke has thinned to thin thread, and a sliver of blue like a small stubborn hope threads itself overhead. He breathes that little color in and makes a decision that contains no certainty but a firm intention to go on unmade and willing to be remade. Then he steps away, and his footfalls carry him toward what is not yet a home, but may yet become one.